Okay, we have here the Reverend Lance Schmitz on our left and the Reverend Mark Christian on the right.
Except that I'm left and he's right. No.
But I'm right and you're left.
Here to talk a little bit about thoughts springing from an article called A Place Called Community by Parker J. Palmer. And to start off the discussion, I'd love to hear your reactions to his thoughts both on loneliness and what that means to community and the true and false kinds of community that can develop.
I think loneliness is a dangerous thing. I mean, it can create a lot of problems. I think it's kind of the sort of endemic human condition is this loneliness that we face. But I think that community has to be more than just solving social, personal need, but taking us outside of ourselves to be able to engage the larger world we find ourselves in.
I think one of the fascinating things he gets at is that loneliness is actually created by the false communities we have.
Yeah.
They don't allow the true connection for people, and that as we've operated more in a mechanical form of community as opposed to an organic or dynamic living community, that it forces a loneliness upon us. We become isolated, and we long for it because we know that's not right. But we've lost the mechanisms, we've lost the organizations, we've lost the structures that help us respond to it. You know, whether it's the fact that we no longer live around our families for most of our lives, or that we're so transitory in where we live that you don't develop those kind of deep neighbor contacts. And even in churches, the number of people who come in and out, who are there for a year or two. All that, I think, feeds into that loneliness.
Well, I think the other piece with that loneliness you talk about is that those lack of those other relationships kind of, they enable us to bend and to shape and to be formed differently. Because as he talks about in here, loneliness is dangerous politically because you're at a place where you can be taken advantage of. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it seems so often that the powers that be want to keep people away from each other, because when we're in isolation, we're more easily manipulated. But when we come together corporately, we become a force to be reckoned with. And I think that Parker Palmer in his article really diagnoses the situation that we have is because so many of us, when we are separate, we get all these crazy ideas, but when we're in a community, we can throw those crazy ideas out and our friends can call something. We can have a culture of critique is what's cultivated in a true community as opposed to a false community.
Well, he says that God is revealed in community.
Right.
That alone, one of the things I like to say is that the person alone cannot be free, they're just alone. If I'm all by myself, I can think anything I want.
Right.
And it doesn't matter. I can do anything I want if I'm all by myself, and it doesn't matter. It's only when I'm in a relationship with someone else, with you, that what I say matters, and you can say, I don't get that. Or I can say, you know, I don't get what you're doing. So we test each other, and it is in that tension between the individuals, or many individuals, that I think that the divine is revealed, that our true humanity comes to place, that we cannot be a full functioning human being by ourselves.
And that's interesting, the idea that we're not a full functioning person by ourselves, but that's sort of like, as Palmer uses the word demonic, when we are by ourselves, it is truly a demonic state, and the fact that we exist for ourselves, we live for ourselves, and we can do whatever we want because we're not responsible for anybody else. But that true community is when we have that sense of claim on one another, that your life has been laid a claim on my life and my life has laid a claim on your life. And now we have, it's no longer that we're just these two isolated beings. We have responsibilities to each other and rights in these relationships with each other. And I think that's the most intriguing piece about our organizing work, is that we're laying claims, and so no longer you're this isolated person that's over here, that you are now my neighbor. You've moved from this place of otherness to this place of sameness and closeness. And so I think that there's something really powerful there that we don't recognize nearly enough.
And what I've experienced in doing the organizing work is how much broader my horizons are now. That the realm of people who I interact with is much broader than it was before. And sometimes that frustrates and irritates me. Many times it delights me. Yeah. But it's true. You know, the thing you said earlier is what drew me to this in the first place. That there are forces that want to keep us separate because we are manipulable when we are by ourselves. And when we're together, we have the opportunity to stand. And the people who have learned to manipulate us, the last thing they want is people talking to each other who don't normally talk to each other.
And when we talk to each other across our lines of division, perceived lines of division, we become more creative, we become more imaginative. I mean, my world is so much brighter now because of the multitude of relationships that I have across this city. I see the world completely differently than I did 4 years ago when we started all of this. And through these, I would not have been able to make it through these 4 years had it not been with all these relationships that led us to this founding convention. So it's out of all these relationships, it's out of all this stuff, and this true community is being generated because we have this culture of critique. We have this culture of ownership in each other's lives, that you are no longer someone else, you are my people, and my people are your people, and we are connected to one another. We're building this beloved community.
Well, and the other thing that comes out of that connection is power.
Yeah.
That by ourselves we have limits, and when we come together, there's more to us. And power brings responsibility, but it also brings some danger. I mean, you have to make sure that you're using the power you've developed appropriately, and that's where we check each other.
Yeah.
And there are topics we're not going to take on.
Right, and I think that's the best thing is when we realize that there are rules to this community. We're not just this free for all, we get to do whatever we want. Because we've entered into these covenantal relationships with each other, we've agreed upon these circumstances. And I think we don't have that language of covenant. We don't have that language of rights and responsibilities in our interpersonal relationships or in our communal relationships very often. And I think that because of that, we're stronger. It's not just because we say we're not going to talk about those things because they might cause problems. We're saying because what we're pushing towards, what we're moving towards is much larger than ourselves, we're not going to deal with these things because we want to be a strong organization, we want to be a strong people, and we want to be able to get along well with each other. And so these covenantal relationships and rules that we have help us create a true community and not a false community.
Well, I think that's the other piece that really comes out of Parker Palmer's stuff is that notion that when you don't have true community, you create rules.
Right.
And there's always got to be some rules.
Right.
But true community creates accountability naturally.
Yeah.
And it lets that kind of loneliness be driven out of our lives because we're being fed by the organic structure.
Yeah.
That when we become a mechanical community or a false community, that's when political correctness begins to rule, as opposed to me caring what you think.
Right.
I anticipate what I think might insult you, and I'm supposed to avoid that, as opposed to really caring what your response is.
I think that idea of political correctness, well, I want to be sensitive to others around us, not so much so that I'm worried about being in real relationship with anybody. I want to have a deep relationship and not a surface relationship that is controlled by the currency of cliches and platitudes. I want to have a real relationship that sometimes causes a little bit of pain or anxiety because that's a real relationship. I mean, you and I have a real relationship. We insult each other all the time. But it's this idea.
You more than me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think that's a really powerful point, is that when we're controlled by anticipation of what someone else might say, that's not a real relationship. Being in a real relationship means willing to trust and to risk. And I think that that's something that we've lost, this idea of the risk.
Well, and Parker Palmer starts by saying we expect a theophany, quoting Buber, that we know nothing but the place, and the place is community. And theophany is a radical inbreaking of the holy.
Yeah.
And that's a frightening thing.
We don't like those
and
things.
It's a transformative thing. But that's what we have the opportunity for now.
Well, and the homily that I was talking about yesterday is we don't recognize that sort of power, that holy inbreaking. And so we tend to move away from anything that might disrupt our lives. And I think that every time we're in a real relationship with each other, there is that beautiful risk of an eruption of the holy that can happen, that can transform all of us. And that's a scary thought because we kind of like how our lives are. We don't want to be changed that much. Yeah. But that's the beauty of the work of organizing, but the beauty of the work of church when we're working towards true communities. Those eruptions of the holy disrupt our lives and help us organize it around something bigger and more beautiful than we can dare imagine.
I agree.
Yes.
He talks a little bit about how we tend to mythologize community and search for this oasis where people think like us and we feel comfortable, which you've talked about to some extent. If you're thinking about a church and developing the kind of community that he's suggesting we should, how do you do that?
It's an excellent question. Do you have another one?
I think you do it by just jumping in the middle of it.
Yeah, you just do it. I think you just try.
And you know that you're going to make mistakes, and some things are going to work and some things aren't. But the idea of being open to the diversity, of experiencing it, doesn't mean that you have to internalize every bit of diversity that comes at you, but you have to learn to acknowledge it and to see its legitimacy, even when it's very different. That we become that utopian oasis that we dream that everything's going to be lovey-dovey. It's like the people who go into a marriage thinking that there's going to be nothing but the good times.
Yeah.
Well, those are the ones who usually fall apart within the first couple of years when they realize that there are hard times and they haven't been prepared for them.
Right, and I think that the metaphor of marriage, the analogy of marriage is helpful because sometimes we stay with each other because we're in love, and sometimes we stay with each other because we're married. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something about church life that's important. It's like, it's not about feelings all the time. It's about this commitment to something bigger than yourself. And I think that's something that we need to remind our congregations and our communities about, is that there's going to be times when we're angry and frustrated and we don't like each other, but we know we're about something bigger.
And that's where that theophany comes in, because you never know when that we know not the place or time, but we know the place in this community, but we don't know the time or the shape.
That radical unpredictability that we don't know, and that can happen and can transform us. I mean, the times that I've been transformed most in my life, I didn't set up any sort of circumstances for it to happen. It just did. Yeah. And I think that this idea of false community and true community and the demythologizing of community, I think that so often we hear the word community and so we have this fuzzy, warm, sort of Mayberry feeling about it. And that's not what it's about. It's about dealing with the town drunks. It's about dealing with all of the problems. But it's because we have this membership in each other's lives. It transforms all of us. Wendell Berry, in his fiction series, he writes about the Port William Township, or as he calls it, the membership. And that's where I take a lot of my understanding of community from, is through this works of fiction where it talks about we have this long history together. And when we participate and engage in a long history together, when we cultivate the long memory, we're able to be steadied in the times of now and be ready for the future that we know not yet. Mm-hmm. And it's in those moments when we cultivate this practice where we remember, we reflect, we are transformed, and we're going forward together. And I think that demythologizes community because we understand our problems that we've had.
One of the other things that he gets to in community is that you're in community not for yourself, but for others. And I get that a lot in the church, when people will say, well, what have you done for me lately, essentially? What am I getting from this? Yeah. And the truth is that you come and you stay committed because you have the opportunity that someone might need what you've experienced. And that feels like you're giving, but you're actually getting in return by making yourself radically available to others by your very presence, even when some days you don't really want to be there.
And I think that the curse of rugged individualism is seeped into so much of our lives. I mean, in so many of our churches, it's about that line, did I get fed today? Yeah. Well, it's not about that. It's about being about something bigger than yourself. And you think you're so creative in your new ideas when you're not.
Well, and this is interesting because, you're obviously Protestant, and I come from a Protestant tradition, but that's the distinction between Catholic and Protestant.
Right.
Is the commitment to the church, to the institution. Right. That what the church functions as is more important than the individual, and Protestantism starts with the notion of the individual believer. So it's an interesting tension.
I have significant issues with this idea that it is just about me and my relationship with the transcendent. It's about me and my relationship with God, because that's a component of it. But when that becomes the end-all, be-all of your existence, is about my relationship with the transcendent, we lose out on the other aspect of how do we relate with each other. Because both of those axes are very important. They're incredibly important. And I think when we miss out on that, we lose something. And this idea of the self-made man, the self-made theology, it's just, it doesn't work.
Well, it's demonic is what he calls it.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. It's... And I view evil, I view the demonic as that which lures us away from the truth, or lures us to believe that I am either more important or less important than other parts of creation, and it's opposed to being a part of creation. And that's the biggest community out there, to understand that you're part of all of creation, and to not be separate from it, but to come to understand yourself as a piece of it, is the truly transforming work. And for me, that's where the theophany really comes. That's where the inbreaking comes, in those moments when I recognize that I am actually not apart from things, but a part of them.
I think one of the most profound things that I've ever seen and ever heard that really kind of reminds us that we do belong to each other, interestingly enough, comes from Carl Sagan, the atheist. But it was when we see the pale blue dot, when Voyager's as far out as it can be, and saying, wow, we're on this tiny blue dot in the midst of these billions of galaxies and billions of stars. We do belong to each other, because this is our planet. This is who we are, and we do belong to each other. So no matter how big I think I really am, I'm on this blue dot in the middle of space, and we are connected to each other. And so when we participate in things that pull us apart from each other, we are acting in demonic ways. So, yeah.
So when you think, this is the last question, unless you have others. This is the last question. When you think about your work on developing a church community in both of your settings, has that altered at all since you began doing this bigger, broad-based sense of community building in Oklahoma City?
Next
yes,
question.
Yeah.
Next question.
Answer's yes. Without reservation, yes.
Yeah.
I have a completely different way of understanding ministry than I did 4 years ago when we started all this.
Well, and I mean, I do have a different understanding, but more than that, I have a better appreciation for the range of different kinds of ministries.
Yeah.
That for me is the opportunity to get to know clergy from radically different traditions, and to see what they focus on widens my horizon, whether I internalize it personally or not, to really come to experience that. It's that broadness that comes to us, that if we're open to it, you never know what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, and I just think that the things that I know now that I didn't know when I started all of this, the people that I know now, I have a completely different way of understanding, and I would say a better way of understanding when I existed alone in my own little denominational ghetto. When we can tear down these walls that we've built up that say that we can't learn from each other. I have learned so much about congregational development. I've learned so much about just what does it mean to be doing social ministry, what does it mean to preach, what does it mean to organize church boards, what does it mean to do. Almost every aspect of my ministry has been touched by this work and by this true community that we're building.
Well, and I would even say, yes, it's the true community, but there's actually some discrete skills that these organizations have refined through the years, that as you come to employ them, make you more effective in ministry.
Oh yeah, I did seminary, I have a master's in theology. I did a 9-day training with IAF, and I learned more about development, more about structures, and just how to do introspection in 9 days than I learned in years of theological training. And it is amazing. This is like a vocational school that you learn what to do, and it's amazing. And if we learned anything out of this besides all these people, it's just we learned how to be ministers differently.
Yeah.
And just more better.
More better.
More better. That's what we did.
As a minister, would you, thinking about the organizing work, thinking about the true communities that we're challenged to do, what would you say to a congregant in a church about what we're doing with the church?
Well, we're opening doors. We're finding the opportunity for the church to be connected to the larger world in a way that is important, that we often don't, because churches tend to want to build walls and to understand that what happens inside the walls is what matters. And this is opening doorways. It's opening windows, and it's making us. It's giving us the opportunity to step outside those comfort zones, and that's where the transformation happens. That's where the magic happens. That's where the divine happens.
And I think, in addition to everything you said, coming from my tradition, I think it is enabling us as people, when we do this work, to learn that every single person possesses the divine spark, and that our world is not nearly as terrifying as we think that it is, and people aren't nearly as vicious as we've been told that they are. And so when we build these relationships...
There be dragons there.
There be dragons there. Do not go across the oceans. But we've learned that the world is more beautiful, and God's world is more majestic than we can ever dare imagine, if only we take these steps towards the other, and they take these steps towards us. And when all of these divine sparks that exist in all of us come together, we really do create this fire of beauty and wonderment that lets us know that God is radically and deeply in love with all of God's creation, and that we are fighting back the forces of evil and the demonic in this world. And I think that there's nothing to risk except for some discomfort that leads to beauty.
Well, and for me, from my perspective, one of the things that I talk about when the church is functioning right, it's dealing with both the intimate and the ultimate.
Right.
Good, true, appropriate intimacy where I know you and am known by you on more than a surface level. But more than that, and this is where it works with both, is the ultimacy of committing yourself to something that matters to you, that matters to the world, it's more than it matters to you. It matters to people you don't know yet.
Right.
And when we're doing that piece, we've got the vertical and the horizontal. That's when the church is functioning right, and that's one of the pieces that I think has been enhanced for us here at First Unitarian because of this work.
And I think from our perspective at Capitol Hill Church the Nazarene is when people have learned that their world is bigger than them, that there's something beautiful, and that when things fall apart, there is a community of intimacy and ultimacy that is there for you. Because your world will fall apart. It's one of those things you can guarantee. Is that bad things are going to happen, and you're going to need people to protect us and to protect you.
And when good things are going to happen, you want to have people to celebrate them
exactly.
with. Because that way they last. Otherwise, it's just a moment and it's gone.
It's telling those stories that move on and then inspire and encourage others.
Again, not for yourself.
Yeah.
You're in community for the other people.
Yeah, it's that radical relationship that's possible that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing, is that when we are in true community with each other across all of our lines within our congregations, it's dangerous because it's unknown, it's unfamiliar, but it's also dangerous because it is a subversive community that threatens the status quo, and the status quo doesn't know what to do with that, and that's not what they want.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.